Okay, I'm going to check the link. Do you have another person? I'm going to check.
Sorry, I didn't realize my mic was off. We still need to wait for Milka.
Do you have a WhatsApp to send her a message? Shruti, can you see the YouTube? And can you post it on Facebook? I'm trying to also check it out.
I'm not able to hold on. I think
I'm also checking. Hold on.
yes, I do have it. Like I'll send you the link.
Helen Hansel was
Yes, I can post it on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay, great. Thanks. And I'll share it on the group's WhatsApp group. Sumina, do you have the contact for Milka? Should I message her?
I sent her an email, yeah.
Do you have a WhatsApp?
Unfortunately not. Because we've been communicating via emails.
We have Mo who's joined.
Yeah.
Sunita who's joined. Yeah.
Or I'm checking the Facebook to share. Hi, all the other speakers. Sabha, Sita, thank you so much for joining in. Sorry, just running the logistics.
Hi there. Thank you for having us.
Hello, Tina. Hey,
Hi. Lovely to see everybody. I'll just show my face before the main meeting goes up. Hi.
Hello.
Samina, do you want to start? Let me just check.
Shall we begin?
Yeah, just begin on time when Milka comes and I've already sent her a message. Otherwise, go ahead. A lot of people, we don't want anybody to leave.
Yeah, could you let in the
and let your screensaver be.
Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Sumina Subba and I belong to the Limbu indigenous community from Eastern Nepal. I am currently the Media and Communications Officer at Women for Biodiversity. Today is the International Day for World's Indigenous Peoples. We celebrate the wins, but also remember and acknowledge the continuous struggle of indigenous communities around the world, particularly for the right of self-determination. Self-determination is a fundamental human right that recognizes the inherent dignity and worth of all individuals and groups, affirming their right to freely determine their political, economic, social, and cultural choices. The right to self-determination is recognized in various international human rights treaties, such as the UN Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The recently adopted Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework also calls for the full, equitable, inclusive, effective, and gender-responsive participation in decision-making of indigenous peoples, including children and youth, for access to justice and for the full protection of environmental human rights defenders. In this webinar, we shine the light on 3 brilliant young women who belong to various indigenous communities around the world. And the theme for today's webinar is Young Indigenous Women as Agents of Change. All right, So we have with us today Milka Chapkurir, Sunita Kwangta, and Sabarani Muharjan. I'd like to welcome all three speakers, and I'd like to give a short introduction on each one of them. Milka might join us a little bit later, but that's fine. We have Sabarani and Sunita with us. All right. Just the general guidelines for all the attendees. Please mute when you're not speaking. Please use the chat box to ask questions. We will take them at the end of the webinar. Please make sure that the questions are relevant to the topic, and please be respectful towards one another. All right, we have with us Sunita. So Sunita belongs to the Karen community who live in the border of Myanmar and Thailand. She currently works as international advocate for women's research for Karen Environmental and Social Action Network, KSAN. She loves to work with local communities to document and promote information about how indigenous knowledge has been used to protect endangered and threatened species of flora and fauna inside the Salawin Peace Park in Myanmar. We also have with us Sabarani Muharjan. She is a member of the indigenous Newa community from Kathmandu, Nepal. She is a youth activist who works specially with indigenous youth and is also an executive council member of the Asia Indigenous Youth Platform, AIYP, and the Youth Federation of Indigenous Nationalities, YFIN, in Nepal. Sabah was recently nominated by the Bagmati state government as the executive member of the Bagmati Provincial Youth Council. She aims to use her position to develop and implement efficient, inclusive indigenous policies for the entire province. A fun fact about Sabah is that she's also an athlete of Sambo, which is a Russian martial art. So welcome, Sabah and Sunita. And with that, I'd like to open the floor for discussion. And I'd like to start the conversation with the question, how have young indigenous women been engaging in your region, and are their concerns being addressed appropriately? I think I'd like to begin with Sabah.
Hi, thank you very much, Sumina, first of all, for the wonderful introduction that you gave, and also the fun fact. I really love it. And also, first of all, I'd like to thank the entire team of Women for Biodiversity for this opportunity, for having me. I'm very grateful. And also, happy International Day of World's Indigenous People 2023, everyone. Now, beginning with the question that Sumina asked me, that is, how have been the indigenous young women been engaging in my region, right? And so to answer that, I think, indigenous young women, not only in Nepal, but worldwide, have taken on great responsibilities, right, as a future leaders of their own communities, and by taking action to revitalize, indigenous knowledge, language, and also to safeguard the entire biodiversity. And now specifically talking about the indigenous, young indigenous women's role in my country, in Nepal, is that, first of all, we have I like to, begin with saying that we have a very intimate connection between our cultural heritage and biodiversity, right? So thus, by strengthening our cultural identity, we actually foster a sense of responsibility and connection with our ancestral land. So therefore promoting the biodiversity conservation. So in Nepal, we are collaborating both individually and collectively, harnessing the power of all the youth-led organization that we have to achieve our goal. So young indigenous women in Nepal are actually the frontliners who are defending their territories, their lands, and also taking stewardship of land and resource to maintain the ecological balance, to maintain the biodiversity, right? And especially in Nepal, actually, we are demanding, the federalism based on identity. So we have this struggle among us. So indigenous young women are also the frontliners when it comes to this issue, and we are continuously lobbying for the implementation of indigenous people's right and the constitution with identity and meaningful participation, right? So Except that for indigenous community, I think the intergenerational knowledge transfer is very crucial, because as we all know, a lot of our history is orally transmitted. So it is crucial that we prioritize the intergenerational knowledge exchange between our ancestor and us. So indigenous young women are very much aware about it, and they are actually prioritizing this thing to preserve our cultural identity in Nepal. And except from that, if we talk about let's talk about the scenario of the rural communities in Nepal, right? If we compare between Kathmandu city and rural community, then especially in the rural areas, young indigenous women, they do not speak the national language, and so it is a far-fetched thing to understand if they speak English. So it is crucial that we also develop this educational curriculum. So we have also been doing that. And lastly, we are also active in advocacy and policy engagement in Nepal. Thank you, Samina. That will be it.
Thank you, Sabha. I truly identify with what you've just said as well. We do have the tradition of orally transmitting our knowledge and culture and our norms and values to generation after generation. I would like to pass this question to Sunita as well. Sunita, if you could please turn on your camera and
Yes.
welcome.
Yes,
Hi.
sure. Thank you for having me today. And I would like to share how our young indigenous women engage in our region, because our current women are the first group who are responsible for family households by collecting food or taking a lead in producing herbal medicines. And most of our current young women can make their costumes or dress by handwoven. These are handed down from generation to generation. And they engage in traditional knowledge, and they have presented current traditional over many decades. And our young women in our community, they have important roles that are valuable to our community. In this day ways, to men in some current community, such as the knowledge of MTFPs, and their also involvement in the and leadership in the conservation and natural resources governance. And like, for example, our KZN has supported the women research team in researching flora, fungi, and by using local indigenous knowledge and society methods. And we also provide a technical help, also the training by a local expert. And another example, our young indigenous women in Kafule have been engaging in a lot of different initiatives, such as tree nursery, tree planting events, also waste management. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, speakers, for the insightful comments. So that brings me to my next question. Like, what kind of change is required for young indigenous women to be able to assert themselves? Yeah, Sabha, if you could start.
Yeah, sure. So, now regarding the thing that how can we, the indigenous young women assert themselves? So that is actually a very, very, I think, a crucial and important question that you raise. So now, as I have also mentioned about how indigenous young women are taking the stewardship of their, traditional knowledge, nature and biodiversity and everything. But the thing is, actually, are there, concern being addressed properly? We also need to talk about that, right? And in order for them to assert themselves properly, I think what is needed is, most importantly, to eliminate the discrimination and violence that the young indigenous women have been facing, right? So we need to create this safe space so that every young indigenous woman feels safe and respected. We need to create this space by, let's say, awareness, by advocating for policy change and whatnot. And also, I think there should be a legal and policy reform. In terms of that, advocating for the legal and policy changes that recognizes and protect the rights of indigenous women, right? And besides that, I think what we can also do is we should also focus on is promoting positive representation of young indigenous women, in media, and raising awareness about their achievements or challenge or all of the initiatives that they have been taking in their community, right? So that we can break the stereotypes, misconception, and also fostering a more, inclusive society. And also it will motivate them more, to do good things for the community if we can, do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Soba. I just want to touch upon a point that you just raised, that you said that young Indigenous women face discrimination or violence, right? You are a young Indigenous woman yourself. So do you have any personal experience of facing such discrimination or violence in your everyday life?
So there are a lot of instances actually, because I'll be very real, right? Not only from the people outside of my community, but sometimes being a young Indigenous woman or an activist, you face a lot of discrimination in terms of what you are doing as well, inside of your organization as well. The opportunities doesn't come like easily. You have to prove yourself again and again, and you have to make sure you grab it, right? And also there's no such easy environment created for us Indigenous women so that we can foster what we are thinking or implement what we are thinking. If we see, I cannot talk about the all women organization in general because I haven't been a part of it, but if we are talking about the youth umbrella organization or stuff like that, then there is this kind of bias, there is this kind of patriarchy and misogyny that we actually face in everyday working life as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. But how do you think we can help this situation, or how do we think we can make positive changes to avoid this kind of discrimination or
so I think
practices?
Yeah, so I think first of all we have to also check the privileges, because among Indigenous youth itself, we have to make sure we understand the approach of intersectionality, right? So we need to make sure we check our privileges at first, but also we are working on such an organization that works for the entire youth sector and also the women. Then why are we in such a space within our organization itself? Then how can we bring change in the community, right? So we have to start from our members as well, and for that we have to understand that it is not only our responsibility as a Indigenous young woman to make sure that we have this good environment and stuff like that, but every member of our organization should understand this thing and take it as their responsibility to make sure that we have this safe environment and that we can put forward our ideas and stuff like that. And also I think the education plays a vital role in that too, because we need to make sure we aware our people on what the issues are and how we need to promote our young Indigenous women forward so that we have more equitable and inclusive societies that we have always dreamt of. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent points, Sabha. Thank you so much. Sunita, so what kind of change is required for young Indigenous women to be able to assert themselves? Because you also come from a very difficult country who's going through a state of civil war. So would you be able to, let's hear what you have.
So the racial equity is very important, correctly, especially as because of the war has involved education and knowledge transformation between generations of Indigenous current people, and young people will inherit their territories. And Indigenous current young women, they have equality to access their education, and especially our current community of Gafule also have women's schools. They want to empower our young women to be a leader in their community and to involve women or young women in local community decision-making process. Beyond education, there are also been a shift in the attitude around women's and roles and greater representation of women in decision-making process and policy making. Education will also contribute to this. We cannot talk about women's empowerment without talking about one of the biggest barriers in our territories, which is the conflict and efficacy by the military government, which destroys schools, homes, farmlands, and cause mass displacement. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunita. You did just talk about the biggest barrier as per your personal experience, but of the military intrusion. How has it affected you personally, your growth or your process or your journey as a young Indigenous woman? Yeah.
Yes. I also was born in Thailand, but my parents immigrated from Myanmar. Also, we have to move to Thailand because of military attacks. So after move to Thailand, we have to fix like many bully, or we cannot access to the right as the Thai citizen. So we have to fight like many years to get a Thai citizen, to be a Thai citizen. And I have, even I went to school, middle school, high school, I was bullied by other friends because I'm not Thai. I'm an ex-indigenous people. Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, being an indigenous young woman, or being a young woman is difficult already because of all the barriers that we have to face. And on top of that, being indigenous and coming from another country is a difficult process, and it's a difficult transformation as well. In the present context, we often hear the terms, intergeneration equity and transformative education, as ways to recognize the role of IPLCs in conservation or indigenous peoples and local communities. Do you think they are building blocks for better future, or are they just catchphrases? Sunita, would you like to begin on that one?
Yes. Young indigenous women might need access to the quality education. So we just need to create this space for young indigenous women to develop their leadership skills and encourage the preservation and celebration of indigenous culture, and provide the economy opportunity such as vocational training, entrepreneurship support, and access to their resources. In my opinion, this tool, intergenerational equity, and this one, they have like potential for positive change in the future. It is also important to highlight that when applying this tool in IPCL's specific strategy and approaches should be different based on the cultural and individual context of different indigenous communities.
Okay, thank you. Sabah?
Yeah, so first of all, very heavy terms, right? Transformational education and intergenerational equity, right? So I think personally for me, indeed for young women and girls, indigenous young women and girls, these kind of transformative education can help them, reclaim their cultural heritage and build self-confidence and develop leadership, or let's say, overcome the barriers they face. But whenever we are talking about the intergenerational equity, then we should be very mindful that we also talk about intergenerational trauma, right? Because it is very crucial, as the intergenerational trauma that is consciously, or let's say unconsciously, is transferred to our younger generation. We are facing the same kind of problems that our ancestors were facing, that my grandparents were facing, right? So now it hinders my autonomy, and also we face that historical injustices and inequality all over and over again. So we need to be mindful about that as well. And now talking about the transformative education, then it may help reclaim all of the heritage and stuff like that. But we need to, again, like I said earlier, we need to make sure we recognize the intersectional nature, the layer of discrimination we face, and avoid the basket approach, right? So now the thing is, I don't know, but in Nepal, it seems like the policymakers, they seem to love the word basket approach, right? But we need to acknowledge the fact that that is actually the beginning of the systematic and structural discrimination we are facing in Nepal, right? It is easier for them to put us under the same basket and just throw a policy so that, they will, for let's say women in general, but then that is how the issue begins, like more and more intensifies through those kind of approaches. And also talking about transformative education more, I want to emphasize also on the prejudice that we face, and prejudice that the mainstream community holds towards the indigenous young women in general, because the habit of questioning, our competency and judging us on the basis of our identity has very much hindered our autonomy. Like I said earlier, we have to prove ourselves again and again, let it be in the job market or anywhere. And also we need to reflect upon the question that, are in these young indigenous women given the space in the decision-making process, and is that space really meaningful? I think it is not, because I can really smell the patriarchy, the discrimination and the misogyny everywhere, right? So until and unless we check these biases, we acknowledge this, it is very difficult. But then, these seemingly big words like intergenerational equity and transformative education, like, are they merely catchphrases? Then I think it can be, but the fact is, the assessment should be done. I think it is very important, the before and after. Like, after giving all of those transformative education, what is the situation of young indigenous women? We have to make sure of that. And have we seen any kind of positive change? And also, are the intergenerational equity that we're talking about really non-biased? So the question lies here, and if done right, then I think these kind of the things we're talking about, the intergenerational equity and whatnot, is actually one of the good ways, if we want to talk about recognition of the role of indigenous women, in conservation, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabha. Very, very well put. Thank you, Sunita, as well. Yes, indigenous communities do face or do carry that intergenerational trauma and the historical injustices that has happened. So yeah, everything that we're talking right now is just about a lot of, there's a lot of barriers, there are challenges that needs to be overcome and everything. So despite all that, what keeps you going? Why do you do the things you do, or what is your aspiration? Sabha?
I think that is a very, very important question, because see, whenever I share my experience, I say it very realistically that, the field that we have chosen, the field of advocacy, it is sometimes very tiring. And as a indigenous young woman, as an activist, like I said, all the barriers are multiplied, right? So it is very crucial that we take care of our mental and physical health in this process, or else it can be very much self-consuming and tiring as well. But then in terms of what keeps me going, I like to present an irony, and I think that will answer my question. The fact is, whenever I represent young indigenous youth in the international platform, I introduce myself as the fact that I belong, from the ancestor of farmers. I belong from the Newa indigenous community and Moharjan, so we are basically farmers. That is what I have been told by my grandparents. But the fact is, the irony is, neither have I ever, seen the farmlands of my grandparents, or nor have I ever seen them doing all the farm activities. So that is actually a very devastating fact, that I'm putting forward, is that because there is no land left. We have been alienated from our own soil in the pretext of development, be it fast track, be it hydropowers, and be it road expansion. We do not have our sacred land left. So how will I be able to see my ancestor doing all of the, traditional occupation they were supposed to do, right? So I think this is, I don't think I need more reasons to be in this moment. So this is very heart-wrenching, and things like that motivates me to fight for my community. Because not only that, I agree with Sunita how she talked about militarization, because even in Nepal, like the recent cases, right, our indigenous brothers and sisters were brutally tortured inside the jail. Why? Just because they were talking about the fact that nobody can talk bad about our ethnicity, bad about our culture. They were demanding for justice, but what they got in return is a brutal punishment. So that is what is happening with my brother and sister, with my community. So I think this reason is enough for me to be in this moment. And even if it is tiring, I just remember that the causes that I started, and I just push forward, looking at young indigenous women like Sunita, like you, Sumina, and it just motivates me to move forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabah. Yes, what feels personal is what motivates us. And with that, I would also like to ask the same question to Sunita. Sunita, what gets you going? Why are you, doing what you're doing? Which is
Honestly, in the past, I was trying to accept who I am as a current people. But after I have to start to work with current CASA, I work with women research team, and then I have a chance to visit there one time. And they are very, very inspire me that when on they are doing their research, and they're still young and very effective to conserve in the forest. And during the research, their research conservation time, they have flexible and the south airstrikes, yeah. And this one they have to live in the fear, but they're still going on to do a reservation and researching. This means that they are very, very bravely to make the decision. And also after meet our friends like Sambat or Domina from, as Sambat say, from you guys, the story like we have similar issue about being indigenous people. So this one inspired me a lot. So I want to continue like to do this job, to do my duty right now. So as working with my community. So yeah, being as we indigenous people, we still have to fight to prove that we are human being with the rights and the same as everyone else.
Thank you, Sunita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we just want to do right by our ancestors and do the right thing is, I think, the crux and the soul of why we are doing what we do. With that, I would also like to open the floor for questions from the audience. If there's anybody who would like to ask any questions to our speakers, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. I will give it a minute. If you'd like, you can also unmute yourself and ask questions. All right, so we have no questions. That means whatever we've said has been clearly transmitted.
Sumina, there's a Tina who's raised her hand.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to just unmute myself. Hi, everybody. No, thank you. I think it's absolutely an honor to also hear both Sunita, Muyu, and Saba. No, I think it's really time for us to also take a seat back and listen to what the young women have to say. And I think I just want to take the floor to also thank you, because I think it's amazing to see the passion that you bring. So I think this is another way for us. I think it's about time for me to call myself an elder. Is to see that the movement, that the process keeps going on, and it's really inspiring. So I wanted to know, like, on this Indigenous Peoples Day, we celebrate it every year, and we talk about the roles that Indigenous peoples play, and we sometimes tend to forget what roles Indigenous youth, but also in particular Indigenous women, play in our communities, in our societies, right? So I also want to ask you today on Indigenous Peoples Day, which is focused on young people, on you, what is the key message you would like to kind of bring out there, rather as a community of donors, organizations? What is some kind of an aspirational message? Like what would you really want all of us to keep in mind going forward, so that to make sure that this doesn't just become a platform to have you, but what should we all consider in our work when we are engaging with youth, but also Indigenous women's voices? Thank you.
Yeah, so should I go with the answers now, or?
Yes, yes, please, Sabha, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think that was very important. And the fact is, I would like to begin with saying that, as UN slogan this year is, under the self-determination part, and how indigenous youth are the change agent, for self-determination and everything. So I'd like to highlight that actually, not only in Nepal, but I think all over the world, indigenous communities in general, they haven't been able to practice their rights to self-determination. And actually, we aspire to see a world where, just because I identify as a indigenous, youth, I don't have to live in fear or die, right? Because a lot of my friends, let's talk about the case in Philippines, right? The government itself has called all of the indigenous youth activists as terrorists. So, the action that government does in Nepal is quite similar. Now, if we don't fight, then maybe they will call us terrorists as well in Nepal as well, right? And regarding the question, the messages that I like to pass on is strongly in solidarity, in the factor of solidarity, because let's take a look at the fact that Nepal has ratified a lot of international treaties, for example, UNDRIP and ILO 169. I think maybe in 2007, they ratified all of this mechanism and treaties, but then more than decades, right? More than decades, it has not been implemented in Nepal. So what we need actually is the international solidarity, so that we can come together and pressurize the government continuously, so that we can implement this on the ground, so that we won't be left stranded more and more. So I think my message will be in terms of solidarity. Yeah, we need to build that. We need that international solidarity.
That is excellent, excellent points. But I would like to pass this question to Sunita as well, because I think it's important to hear from her point of view as well. Sunita, what is the message that you want to put out there? Yeah.
I would like to say the opportunity for our young women is very important, because like today, without invitation that you gave to me, so I won't have an opportunity to sharing about my experience on how our young women have to struggle in many decades. And actually, we do not have opportunity to talk about how the journey we have went through. And it's quite very important for the holder of organization or others to give us opportunity to sharing and to experience our feeling and our fear and what we really want to develop in the future, to involve our young women in every process of, yes.
Yes, wholeheartedly agree to both of you. Second question, how do you deal with changing aspirations and or needs and deal with the contradictions, especially when trying to assert your autonomy? Who would like to take that question?
Maybe should I go? So I like to read the questions again. How do you deal with changing aspiration and needs, and deal with the contradictions, especially trying to assert your autonomy? So what kind of contradiction are we talking about? So here, first we need to make sure that what kind of contradiction can we clarify on that a little bit?
Can I come in because I asked the question?
Yeah, please.
I was about to ask.
Thank you, Sabha, for that. I mean, both of you, Sunita and Sabha, it's been really inspiring to hear what you've been doing, and I mean, it's really kind of it's in some ways making me feel like we are going towards a glass half full and not the other way around. The reason why I said contradictory was on the basis of some of the experiences and conversations I've had, where some, like one is where we talk about community, but we also understand some of the communities where women, there are certain traditional practices which are oppressive towards women and younger women, especially young people and women. And because of that, there have been changing aspirations in me, because young people are no longer restricted to, like, they are also interacting with the rest of the world now that we have phones and gadgets and technology. You also see people living a certain way, and there's a certain idea of a quality of life that is being pushed down on all of us. So when that is being something that all of us are being exposed to, all of us then start developing certain ideas and aspirations and needs. So, as the young Indigenous women, when you see that, it can become contradictory, especially when you're trying to assert your or like your identity and your autonomy of being an young person and Indigenous young women. Like, we're looking at the intersectionality of things also, right? So, then certain things become contradictory in that sense. So, like, that's essentially what I meant of like the good quality of life, as opposed to what exactly is a good quality of life, and then how do you deal with those?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for the question. Well noted. Yeah. So actually, like like I said, I like to be very realistic, but I have heard people said that, oh, in indigenous communities, there's no such kind of discrimination and stuff like that. But there are, right? There are. And while, tackling that, or if we question that, then maybe we are posed with a lot of negative answers as well, right? But then just because we get those kind of negative feedback doesn't mean we have to stop that, because I do that a lot of time in my Newa community itself. I'm questioned a lot of time when I'm talking about my traditional instruments. They do not allow women to actually play in the Guti system that we have, the institution that we have. The women are not allowed to do that. But then me, my sisters, we continuously question them, despite the fact that we get all the kind of raises that we get. But the thing is, despite all the contradiction, and like you said, the in the modern era, the digital world and whatnot, a lot of ideologies can be mixed match or stuff like that. But then also there are needs, and it is nothing wrong about dreaming for a good life and stuff like that. And maybe staying in that indigenous community may not foster that. But then the thing is, what I a lot of time say to young indigenous people is that the moment you were born into this indigenous community, now you were born with the responsibility, right? So no matter what, you have that responsibility, and you should be the one to fulfill that. And I totally agree with all of the contradiction, but then I think if we have that dedication to keep fighting no matter what, regardless all of the thorns and whatnot that we get, then I think we can do it as a young indigenous woman as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sabha. We just have two more questions, and I think after that we need to wrap it up because we've also run over time now. Second question is from Deepika. Hi, Deepika. So nice, so good to see you here. So she asks, she heard a talk once about how community work can sometimes be extractive. Do you have any thoughts on how to combat that? It's in the chat box as well for both speakers to see the question. Would Sunita like to take this question? Sunita, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Yes, can you hear me? This one, how community work can sometimes be extractive. Do you have any thoughts on your combat that? Okay, sometimes. Yes, sure. Our community sometimes have to be extracted, and the most important, we need to please try to have any thoughts. Any thoughts might be how we can. Yes.
Sorry, Deepika, if you're online, could you unmute yourself and further explain what you were trying to ask, if that's okay?
Sure. Hi, Sumina. Hi, Sava. Hi, Sunita. Thank you so much. So I heard this talk once about how, when people often go into communities to do research and, document traditional knowledge. We're taking so much knowledge and not really giving anything back to the community. And I often find that challenging because I'm not sure how I can give back to the community and how I can, not just learn from them but also help them learn, or I don't know how it can be a more collaborative process. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe now Sunita wants to take it.
Okay. Somebody would like to share? Just somebody can go, please.
Okay, Sabah, if you could take this question then.
Yeah, sure. So, like regarding how can I give back to the community is a very crucial question that we should reflect upon, right? So how we can do it is actually, you don't need to do big things. I believe in celebrating small victories as well. So the thing is, if you're talking about the movement itself, then maybe, you get motivated by some sessions on indigenous rights or autonomy, self-determination. Then you just go talk to your a younger sister and you be like, okay, I've learned about this, and I think now we should be in that moment. If you convince that one person, then I think that is a win, right? So that is how you get to the community, and that is how you pursue another person to be in this moment, and that we can connect each other. And also, I think besides that, we don't need to wait for an opportunity or the day like indigenous, world indigenous day to actually do our work, community work. What we can do is actually collaborate, or not collaborate, but then talk with our elders, with our grandparents, and ask what are the major concerns that we are facing and how as a youth you can eliminate it, right? We can also do that from our individual perspective. But if we are talking about the collective perspective, then you can definitely join the indigenous institution, the youth indigenous institution that you have in your community, so that you can collaboratively work towards giving back to the community. So that is what you can do in the community level. And if you want to go beyond that, then you can also join the national level initiatives, and also put forward the voices of your community in the international level. If you are talking about if you are thinking about joining the regional organization as well. So there are a lot of ways that you can connect with the youth and also give back to the community. So be it can be by being affiliated with organization, or from the individual level as well. Yeah, that is what I like to put forward. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that question, I think just to say that I think Sunita, what Deepika was actually one.
I would like to say a little bit about this. This question, the same question with Samba. Yeah, actually, we learn from each other where we visit the community and we share our experience and we work together. Most of our staff we learn from our community, and because we go to the field and we learn from the community, which they want, and we learn about their knowledge, their tradition, also exchange to each other. Yes, like we help each other.
All right. Thank you. We have one last question. This is from Valerie. So she asks, what would be your stand towards the UN 30% initiative for the conservation of land and sea? Do you share the fears of other indigenous groups, organizations that this will threaten the remaining indigenous territories, and had indigenous women a seat at the table when this scheme will be elaborated internationally? This is this question is a more, I think it has a more wider approach, but still, if anybody would want to take this question, then that would be great.
It's more technical, but then definitely, as we have stated, how close we are to nature and how we worship it and stuff like that. So all of this initiative that we were talking about, and also I see indigenous women, and had indigenous women a seat at the table when its scheme will be like. So I like to actually hear from the person who asked the question, if they can elaborate more, so I can go into that. Is it possible? Valerie.
Yeah, I'm trying. Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm not used to be in a panel when I'm not just listening. Yeah, you can see me. Yeah, I'm actually, my question probably comes more from, I live in Kenya. And of course, I was also joining the panel to hear from Milka Chepkorir what her stand is on that. For me, it's more interesting to hear from also other indigenous women from other parts in the world when these negotiations will happen, like how we do the more colonial conservation schemes, like the fortress conservation schemes. How do you see that it will actually threaten the remaining land, which is still like managed by indigenous communities? Or do you see that within the UN schemes, you will also have a say at the negotiation table, like indigenous women globally? Is it clear what I'm trying?
Yeah. So now talking from the perspective of Nepal, in terms of participating in all of this UN mechanism, significant mechanism, right? Let's talk about from the perspective of indigenous youth, myself. So we are very much limited, and we do not have that quite an access to be in that significant discussion. So it is a far-fetched thing to think about, being in the decision-making table itself, right? Because in a lot of UN mechanism, be it COPE or be it whatever, all of the UN mechanism in terms of Nepal, no, we do not have that opportunity to be in that decision-making table. But let's talk it from the perspective of government itself. They do not provide any quota or system like that, so that they ensure the participation of women or young individuals from the indigenous community itself. So it is a lack situation when we are talking from the perspective of Nepal, actually.
Yeah, just want to add a little clarification to that. I think what Valerie was asking or referring to is the GBF. She's talking in terms of the target 2 of the recent GBF that was adopted. So it's a 30 by 30 target. Sunita, do you think you are more, I think, familiar with the global biodiversity framework? How do you see the role of indigenous women in terms of this target 2, which is 30 by 30? Yeah.
See, women's role is a conservation part, because women have a very important role because they run the family in the lake, by of the natural resources, and they're familiar with the forest. So our women, we need to empower women voice in terms of conservation and negotiation process about diversity. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita and Sabah, and thank you for the participants for asking such good questions. I think with that, I would like to wrap up this webinar as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time and being here. Any other questions or concerns that you have? I think we'll take it. We'll take it after. If you have, yeah.
Can we have a quick photo of everyone?
Oh, yes. If everybody could turn on their camera.
Oh, we've got more. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. Smile.
Did we get it, Shruti?
Yes, we did.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you to the speakers for graciously agreeing to become a part of this panel today. We touched upon really, really interesting topics and a lot of things that I think we can identify with. With that, I would like to say goodbye And if you have any further questions that you want to ask, please write to communications@womenforbiodiversity.org. You have that email in our website as well. And we'll be happy to take further questions if you have. That's it from us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Have a good
you.
one.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Hi, Samina.
In the live YouTube, we also